In this part of the video, we'll talk about classification. And remember, classification is arbitrary, right? My example I keep going to, you could classify vehicles as cars, trucks, motorcycles, vans. You could classify vehicles by color. You could classify vehicles as front-wheel drive, four-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, all-wheel drive, right? Classification is just how to categorize things. And with skeletal muscles, we can classify them by the type of contraction or how they make ATP. An older way is type of contraction. And really what we're talking about is there's differences, right? Some muscles are built for power. Some muscles are built for speed. Power is going to be related to diameter, right? It makes sense. The bigger around this muscle fiber is, the more power it has. But speed really relates to chemical processes. Speed is the enzymes actioning, the action potential propagating, going down the line, calcium flowing in and out. And if we're looking at the type of contraction, that's where terms like fast twitch and fast twitch, we think about powerful that have a quick and a really brief contraction. And the opposite of that would be a slow twitch fiber. Slow twitch fibers are more for posture or for holding something up for a longer amount of time. If a baseball was flying at me, I want my fast twitch fibers to get my hands up to protect myself. If I'm carrying something up the stairs, I'm probably going to want more slow twitch fibers so I have endurance. Another way to classify them was how they supply that ATP, whether we're oxidative. If I'm oxidative, I'm going to be using oxygen, and that's going to give me more fatigue resistance. I can last longer. Oxidative, I've got lots of capillaries. That means blood supply. So these literally are reddish or a darker color. Oxidative fibers is dark meat if you're eating chicken. There's lots of blood supply, but also lots of mitochondria to build up that ATP and energy. And dark meat is dark, not necessarily from the blood, but from that myoglobin. That's the stuff that's stored in muscles. The other category is more fatigable. These are more burst. These don't have endurance. These are the glycolytic fibers. They don't really need oxygen. They're anaerobic. So there's still some blood supply, but not as many. There's still some mitochondria, but not as many. And so white fibers are glycolytic. Anatomy gets so complicated. We've got three types of skeletal muscle fibers. And originally, an older term was type 1, type 2A, and type 2X. Right? Why not just type 1, 2, 3? All right, let's start at the top. Older term type 1, but the more common term slow oxidative. They're slower to contract. They don't have much power, but they do have more endurance. Oxidative means I'm aerobic, right? I'm going to be breathing more when I'm using these. Slow oxidative, the old term type 1. Kind of the opposite is fast oxidative and type 2A. Also, unfortunately, a third name for these are intermediate fibers. And intermediate literally means they're between the other two. They have a light red because they do have some blood supply and some glycogen storage, and they use a little bit of oxygen. The third type is fast glycolytic. Another name, fast anaerobic. These are the fast ones. Again, it's a different way of classifying them, but if you're jumping to fast twitch, yes, these are the ones that respond really fast and can help me. But these contractions are really brief because I don't have much ATP stored there. These are the largest muscles that tend to be white because there's not much blood supply, not much myoglobin. Keep going. I don't think that's a major idea right now. Because in reality, most muscles have a mixture of all of these. Yes, there is some research that says like specific training, then I could develop more fast twitch fibers, or if I'm doing more endurance training, I could go for more oxidative fibers. But in reality, a muscle has a mixture of all of this. If I think about like my hand muscles, my hands have more fast glycolytic fibers, right? I need to quickly move my hand. If I'm falling down, I want to catch myself before my face hits the ground, right? Another group of muscles would be like my postural muscles, my back muscles. They're slow oxidative, so they have some strength, but they're not going to fatigue. I can stand up straight all day. And if we compare a couple of athletes, if I'm a long distance runner, then I'm going to have even more of these slow oxidative fibers, especially in my legs, right? The more, when people talk about getting into shape, they're developing, or at least these muscle fibers are the ones that are responding to the training. Versus if I'm doing sprints, like maybe I get into basketball and I'm going to focus more instead of endurance sprints, now I'm going to develop more glycolytic fibers. Partly by training, partly by genetics. Here's a picture that just shows in reality, if we looked at the end of this muscle, all of these types of fibers would be in each of these fascicles. All right, a different idea here. This has to do with tension. And what we're going to do is create this myogram, a graph that shows us some muscle activity. In order to do that, we had a computer set up. We dissected this muscle out of something, maybe a frog or some other structure. We put a little bit of tension into this muscle by adding some weight. And then we have a battery where we could give it some different electrical charges. This muscle hopefully will contract. As it contracts, this sensor is going to notice what's happening in here. We're going to get this graph over here. The parts we're going to see is here's the muscle where it's at rest. A stimulus is going to come in, that muscle is going to do some work, it's going to contract, and then that muscle is going to relax. All of that would be one twitch. I've also heard it called a simple twitch or a single twitch, but this is one twitch that comes from one stimulus. That stimulus had to reach that threshold. Again, a threshold was enough to get a reaction, right? If somebody bumps your chair once, it's below your threshold. If there's somebody next to you, especially a stranger maybe that you don't know, and they're kicking your chair like this, at some point you're going to reach your threshold and cause a reaction, right? So threshold is what it takes to get this going on. The first thing after the threshold is met is a latent period. That's just a moment when nothing happens. But here's the idea. It's after the stimulus. The next thing that happens is the muscle actually contracts. We're increasing tension. All of that power stroke where thick grabbed thin and pulled it in is going on during the contraction. And the last part of the twitch is when the muscle has done its work and it's relaxing. We're going back toward that baseline. Those cross bridges are letting go. The contraction is a much faster period of time. The relaxation takes a little bit longer. Here is the muscle. Here's where the stimulus happened. Here's that latent period. It's just a moment after the stimulus before anything happens. Think about like the stimulus is somebody ringing your doorbell. Ding dong. There's just a second when you're like, what was that? And then you realize, oh, that was the doorbell. During that, what was that? That was the latent period. And then you got up and went to the door. Or maybe you didn't, who knows. But that's the contraction period. And you did that pretty quick. But then once you were up, it took you a little bit longer to relax and get back into your chair and calm back down and kind of reset. We don't function with just one simple twitch, right? When we're moving, a muscle has to be stimulated continuously or repeatedly. We can also do some things like recruitment. And a fancy term for that is multiple motor unit summation. Think about if you were in a club and you were doing recruitment, what would you be doing? Yeah, getting other people to join you, right? So when I'm recruiting, I'm getting other motor units to get involved. For example, if I'm trying to lift a pencil, and I'm only trying to use my thumb and maybe one finger, and that's not enough to lift up this pencil, then I'm going to recruit some other motor units, maybe even down to my wrist. Versus if I'm going to lift a suitcase, maybe I think it's empty and it's really full, and it weighs much more than I thought it was, and instead of just using my forearm muscles, I've got to recruit muscles from my shoulder, my back, maybe even my legs, right? All of this recruitment's going to get much more, many more motor units, many more motor units involved with this. At some point, we've got enough electricity that no matter what, I've done the maximum amount of contraction. I can only recruit so much, and there is a limit. I mean, if you're familiar like with the Incredible Hulk, right? This is what the Hulk has where he doesn't reach that maximum contraction, or the She-Hulk, she doesn't reach maximum contraction. She goes through a new, it's hypothetical, but another physiological process. But you and I have maximum contraction. When we're doing this recruitment, the first thing is we recruit smaller motor units. And then as we start to get tired, we recruit larger motor units. Think about like if you're holding something and at first you hold it up, and then as your arm starts to get tired, your forearm aches a little bit, and by the time you've been holding it up longer, your shoulder's hurting and your back's hurting. You recruited more and more help. What we're seeing in this chart here is the tension. How much tension? Think about lifting a 5-pound weight versus a 20-pound weight. A 20 pound is going to have a lot more tension. And one way we could get more muscle tension is by increasing the electricity going into it. This stimulus was this strong and it created this much tension. Then we gave it a stronger stimulus. So now we have more tension in there, right? The next one, the tension goes up higher because of a stronger stimulus. But there's a point where no matter how much electricity I put into here, even if I pulled it out of the wall and stuck it to you, you couldn't lift a car, right? There's a maximum amount of contraction. And once I reach that, I can increase the stimulus all I want, and I'm not going to go past maximum. In the lower portion, we're seeing a different idea. We're seeing some recruitment. So here's the first muscle group that's doing some work. As it gets tired, it starts to recruit a second motor unit. But notice this second motor unit is a little bit larger than the first one. As this one gets tired, and this one is still working, but now we've got 3 different motor units. And the idea, every time I recruited somebody a little bit bigger, probably able to do a little bit more work. And just to plant an advanced idea though, the downside of larger motor units is I lose that fine motor skill, right? It's the difference between putting a key in a lock with using a small motor unit versus imagine trying to hold that key between your elbows or between your knees and align something up there. As soon as I start using larger motor units, I've lost that fine motor skill. Some terms for our notes to finish off this area. What we were looking at was summation. If we're doing sums in math, what are we doing? Yeah, adding things together. Perfect. And if we send electricity going to a muscle about 20 times per second, we get rid of that relaxation period. Everything just sums together. Everything adds together. And now we can get more tension. We can continue to increase that frequency and cause a couple of other things. In the next slide, we're going to see that tetany is the maximum, right? At first, if we increase it, we're going to get incomplete tetany. It's going up, getting ready to tabletop. So again, what happened? We've started doing wave summation. We added things together. The first part is incomplete tetany. I'm getting more tension. Tension increases. At some point, it reaches a maximum. On the myogram, it's going to show tetany. That's the flat line. And that's what really we've maxed out what the muscle can do. Let's take a look at that. I'm going to start on the right side because that's just what we were talking about. Here we're having some stimulus, and notice the stimulus are getting closer and closer together. We start to summate. Instead of charging and then relaxing, these muscles are not getting a chance to relax. These muscles contract, and then they get another stimulus, so they contract again. This is causing more and more tension in here. As we're going up, we're doing wave summation. This one is added to this one, so they're summed, summation. Then we start to reach this plateau. So once we get to the top, we go through a quick phase of incomplete tetany, but very, very soon it's tetany. No matter what else we do, it's not going to get any stronger. And that's just before fatigue happens. And notice here, they're still firing off a stimulus. They're still trying to get the muscle to contract, but it literally can't. It's reached fatigue. It physically can't. This is one on the left side is the idea. Each one of these is a simple twitch because they're not happening fast enough. If we're in order to start getting summation, we've got to be reaching about 20 stimuli per second, which is what our nervous system does easily. Much slower, and especially on an experiment like we were seeing where it's done through a computer, we can set a certain frequency, and that has no summation at all. Every time we do a stimulus, the muscle has a latent period, contracts, relaxes, then another stimulus, and it starts over. Here we have the exact same amount of tension with every stimulus. Here we summate, so we get stronger tension after most of these stimuli until we reach tetany. Another idea that goes along with this, and this is the last part of the slide, is muscle tone. And tone has to do with resting tension. And sorry for this sound, but like cars have tone. Some cars sound like this. Right, real slow, the engine's almost cutting off. Some cars have a tone like this when they're just parked in neutral, and they're just ready to go, right? Especially like a sports car or something like that. So muscle tone, same. Okay, I'll quit doing sound effects. Muscle tone's the same idea. How much tension is in there just when you're at rest. This is an involuntary nervous system process, and we'll talk more about that in the last module of 223. But basically the way it works is it doesn't shut your whole, when you're just watching TV, your whole postural muscles don't shut down, but most of them do. And just a few muscles in your upper back are fired off to keep your head up straight, and a few muscles in your shoulders, and a few muscles in your leg, but most of them are kind of turned off. And then they just fire off randomly. A couple of different neck muscle cells are used at 8:05, and then different muscle neck cells are used at 8:07, right? They're just so that nothing gets fatigued. We're not really creating enough tension for movement just to hold your body in place. And when you're really in a deep sleep, like when everything is just collapsed and the body actually expands a little bit because there's less muscle tone. All right, great job making it through another video.